Change the heart, clear the mind, and renew the soul. Welcome home. I'm John Campbell, and I'm the owner and CEO of Casa Colina. And this is my story about how I battled addiction and got into recovery and started Casa Colina. And this is how it all began. I was born just outside of Dallas, Texas. My mom, my dad, and I had a little brother. We grew up in a little town in DeSoto, Texas. And I had a pretty normal childhood. Great family, vacations, good times. And then, I first remember when school started, and that was the first time in my life where I had to fit in and feel a part of and be accepted. And I remember from an early age not feeling that and struggling in school and struggling with following the rules and being compliant. So I moved around schools. I started out in elementary school, moved to a different middle school, and eventually moved to a different high school. So my issues really started way before I ever picked up a drink or a drug. And it really got bad when high school started. So I just started at a big high school in Dallas. Lots of kids that had gone to school together their whole lives, and here I am coming in, trying to make friends, trying to fit in. And the first thing I found was the group of kids that were doing the wrong things, because that's what I liked. In a way, I think I wanted attention. We started smoking weed as often as we could for a 14 or 15-year-old. And then that progressed to drinking, on the weekends and whenever we could, and getting fake IDs and finding means to get alcohol. I had to repeat my sophomore year. So my parents did what they thought was best, and they moved me out of the large public high school and put me into a small private all-men's boarding school in the state of Virginia. And then the school was designed to help young men who were having trouble in school, having behavior issues, and help them correct that and get back on the right path. So you can imagine, it's me and a bunch of young men who want to cause trouble in the woods of Virginia. And I knew some tricks of the trade, but when I got there, I just learned more about how to feed my habit, how to abuse over-the-counter medicine, how to huff Freon out of air conditioning units, and how to continue to abuse drugs and alcohol. So my parents were watching my life fall apart. And at the worst point, we all went to church together on Easter Sunday. I'd been out all night, partying, using drugs and alcohol, and it got so bad to the point where I couldn't sit through the whole church service. And I had to go out in front of the church to get fresh air. And I was throwing up in the bushes. My parents are wondering what's going on with John. And they come out and they see me, and I'm smoking a cigarette and just in really rough shape, and I couldn't even make it to Easter brunch. And I think at that point, they knew they really had to seek help. And that's when they spoke with the drug and alcohol counselor I was seeing at the time. My dad figured out I was stealing from the family, and I was presented with two options: to either go to prison and they were going to press charges for forging signatures, or to go to treatment. And I chose treatment, not because I wanted help, because it was the better of the two options. So I arrived in treatment in Utah. Then the first month or so, I was on the fence. I wasn't really listening to the professionals. Wasn't taking direction. I was hard-headed. But there were some powerful moments, even in that first month. One specific powerful moment I remember is they were trying to get me to seek out some version of a higher power. And that was something that was just never in the cards for me. But I was willing to give it a try. And the only thing I could think to pray for was one of the members of my family I stole a lot of money from was my grandmother. And my grandmother was like everybody's grandmother. She was a sweet old lady and gave me everything I wanted. Never did anything wrong to me. Was the best. And I felt terrible about stealing money from her. So all I did was I prayed, not even on my knees, just laying in a bed in a treatment center, said I would like my grandmother to forgive me. And the next day I received a postcard in the mail from her, and it said something to the effect of, "John, I know that really wasn't you, and I forgive you." And so at that point I was blown away, and I was like, okay, maybe these people have some sort of an idea. They know what they're talking about. So, but still, even after that burning bush moment, I still wasn't ready to give it all up. I would go on these 2 or 3 month cocaine binges where I would, remember watching the sun coming up at times, and it just got out of control. So while I'm working at this bank, I got the bright idea to start forging signatures and stealing money from my family. I was presented with the options of either you go to prison, or we're going to press charges because you're forging signatures and stealing from the family, or you can go to treatment. I was 21 years old, had a lot of life ahead of me. I was never going to go to prison. I chose treatment. When my family came up for family program, it really had a huge effect on me and really drives my passion and why we have such a strong family program at Casa Colina. So I remember sitting in a group with my family, with about 40 people in the room, and having to listen to how my drug use affected my family, my mom, my dad, my brother, and it was the first time I think I really realized the effect I'd had on others. I was so selfish and so consumed with my next drug, my next high. How can I get away with whatever I was trying to get away with at the time? It really made me realize, wow, I've really hurt all those around me. And we get so selfish in addiction, we don't realize the harm we cause to those around us, and especially the ones that love us the most. I remember working with this new counselor in a group. I was taking things lightly at the time. He said something to me that stuck with me now over 13 years later. He said, "Do you realize what you've done to your family? Every day you chose to drink alcohol, take pills, and put whatever you could into your body. And you could have easily killed yourself. And it never occurred to you that would affect everybody around you for the rest of their lives. Do you realize how selfish you are?" And that message spoke truth to me at the time and really put the mirror in front of me to take a look at myself. So all these instances of praying, family program, being assigned a new counselor, things started to click. Got a sponsor in treatment, started to learn to work the steps, and completed 60 days of treatment. And at that point, it was, okay, what are the next steps? I had my plan, the treatment center and my family had their plan. And once again, I was faced with two options. It was, you can do your plan, John, but we're not going to support it. And you can face prison time. Or you can go to a sober living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So I arrive in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and there was about 20 guys in the program. They were all young men just like me. But I still wasn't completely bought in. And I remember trying to call my mom and my dad from the sober living and say, "This place is a dump. Come get me. I'm ready to come home. I want more freedom. I want my car back. I want my cell phone back." And they wouldn't come get me. They listened to the experts. And that probably saved my life. And I went out and found a job, and my first job I got sober was at a Quiznos. So I got hired on as a sandwich artist. Started riding my beach cruiser to work, I started making some friends at the sober living. Once I had settled in, I was able to have some fun. And a lot of people ask me today, what was the most important thing for you at 21 years old to get sober and stay sober? And it wasn't treatment, wasn't a counselor, wasn't necessarily the 12 steps or a sponsor. For me, it was that I met several other young men like me, and we became lifelong friends. We all wanted to stay sober together, and we had fun, and we had a blast learning to live life together. Another part of the program is, it was a 12-step based sober living, so I got a sponsor and really started to work the steps. Met a great guy from Louisiana, and he really spoke to me, and so we met every week. We started doing step work, started reading the big book, things I really didn't do much while I was in treatment, but now I was more willing to take a look at myself. And every day I started to feel better. I remember I was 5 months sober. I got up at 7 a.m. to go to the bike rack to take the lock off my beach cruiser and go to my job at Quiznos in my uniform. I remember walking, and then it was a beautiful morning, and there was sunlight coming through the trees, and I realized I was the happiest I'd ever been. And if I could be happy working a minimum wage job with no car, no cell phone, none of those distractions and things that really weren't important in life, I had a better relationship with my family, I can do this for the rest of my life. I told myself in 5 months, you can do this. It's something I want to try to achieve. And I never looked back since. I remember when my father and my family came to visit that first time in Baton Rouge. And I remember my dad showing up to Quiznos, and I'd gotten a key to the store and I was able to open it, and that was a big deal. And I remember my dad coming in, seeing me working behind the counter, making sandwiches, checking people out, and I got to make my dad a sandwich. And he was more proud of me at that moment than any other accomplishment I had in my life. And we're talking about a Quiznos sandwich. Because he knew I was sober, I was happy, I was safe, and I was taking care of John. So farther down the line in the sober living, I got to go home and make amends to my grandmother and to all those I heard around me. I remember handing her a jar of money I had saved. I would throw $1, $2, $5 in there, whatever little tip money I made at Quiznos, and I don't know how much was in there, but it wasn't how much I stole, and I gave it to her, and I made those amends, and it was the hardest amends I ever had to make. I don't think she ever opened the jar, but still I knew I had tried my hardest at the time to make that right. Made amends to my family, came back and finished the program. I spent 11 months in this sober living. So I was 13 months sober, graduating the program, trying to figure out the next step. The next step for me was I moved into an apartment with 3 other guys I had met there. We're all over a year sober, and we're all committed to recovery. At that point, I decided to go back to community college, which I had tried several times and failed. This time was different. Wasn't sure what I wanted to be or who I wanted to be, but that wasn't important at the time. It was the fact that I could prove to myself that I could be a successful college student and make good grades. And I was studying accounting at the time. And then I got offered a job to work at the sober living in the treatment center that I went through as an overnight technician. So I would stay overnight, watch the facility, do bed checks, answer the phone. And that was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. And I had a boss at the time, and he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about becoming a counselor? You're really great with clients, everybody likes you." At first I was resistant to it. It was something I never ever thought I would want to do. But at 18 months, I took the risk. I changed my coursework at the community college to focus more on counseling and psychology. And then I got my internship, my Louisiana drug and alcohol counselor internship license to be a counselor, addiction counselor in training. So I started working at the treatment center, and more of a counselor role and a clinical role. And then I transferred to a university and started studying social work. Completed my bachelor's degree in social work. This whole time I was making straight A's and doing well in school, working at the treatment center. I mean, I was a full-time student taking a 15-hour course load, working a full-time job. I was doing something I never thought I was going to be able to do, and I was dedicated to learning and perfecting my craft. So I got my bachelor's degree in social work, started going to LSU, and while at LSU I was in their master's program for social work. You know, and I wanted to learn more than what I already had about addiction, so I took an internship at an adult psych unit at a hospital, and I wanted to learn more about the mental health side. So I started to study more about mental health disorders and how to treat those and dual diagnosis. So after I completed my internship and finished my master's degree, I started working at the sober living again and moved my way up to clinical director. And eventually finished my clinical license and became an LCSW. So at that time it was 2015, you know, and again I was reevaluating my goals, and eventually I knew I always wanted to have something that was my own. And my father called me and said, hey, there's a beautiful ranch for sale down by our property, 220-acre ranch. He said it would make a great treatment center. He said, do you want to do it? And I said, absolutely. So we purchased the land that Casa Colina is on today and started working towards opening a treatment center. We were finally able to open it in 2017. As I came on as clinical director, I wanted to focus on the clinical services and make us one of the premier treatment centers in the country. And a lot of that I learned through my own work and being trained in psychodrama and experiential work, and brain spotting. And I wanted to bring that to the Casa team. So when we opened Casa Colina, I wanted to offer people the best chance to stay sober. And that's why we chose to be gender specific and men only. And it's also the reason we chose to make it a 90-day program. Because today all the research shows that the longer an individual can stay in treatment, the higher their chance for recovery is. So I spent 3 years as the clinical director, working on our clinical services, building the right team, and perfecting what we do. At that point in time, I decided it was time to assume the role of CEO and to take Casa to the next level. And that's what my focus has been for the past year. Being the CEO of Casa Colina is a culmination of many things. My own journey in recovery and what I've learned along the way, what I've learned working at different levels of care, through school, starting out as an overnight RA and working my way up to clinical director at a different program. And also what I've learned traveling the country and seeing what other programs do. And knowing lots of people in the field and what works best for helping men recover. During my time as CEO, we've taken Casa Colina to a new height. We're the premier treatment center in Dallas, Texas, and now we're increasing our reach across the country. As I sit here today, going into my 14th year of recovery, with over 10 years of experience in the addiction and mental health field, I want to say to those watching this video, give yourself the greatest gift you can and come to Casa Colina and begin the healing process today.